Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 216.
This week's episode is
brains.
It's zombies. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, watching a very excited Michael. I'm Jeffrey W.
And
Ingram.
I am Michael Miller, filled with chloroform and long dead.
Chloroform.
Oh no, I'm using the wrong. I'm thinking
I don't know
formaldehyde. Why did I go to chloroform?
Okay. I was going to say
I don't know why my brain went to
my shoes in the army.
My brain
had
went
those.
to the wrong chemical. Formaldehyde is
my shoes in the. Chloroform is really good for actually making shoes look spit-shined all the time. So a little army hack cheat there for people. If you see those high shine shoes in the store, they're chloroform.
Good to know. So you want to watch out for those shoe shiners.
Those shoe shiners are zombie spreaders.
Don't stand in front of them. They're gonna get you.
Okay, so Michael's been itching to do this episode
years,
since episode 78, I believe.
Yeah. This week we're doing a fun one. So this is kind of, we're not building today. We are just geeking out on fiction love, and we're talking about zombies. Now, obviously near and dear to my heart, I, have a zombie novel in the works. So that's, I have been loving on zombies before zombies were cool. I have loved zombies since I was about 14, 15 years old. So we're talking 25 years, 27 years. So back then, you didn't have anywhere near the bevy of wonderful choices that you have today. Back then, it was pretty much, the Romero zombie movies, a couple of the remakes, Return of the Living Dead.
So Night of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead.
Night of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Return of the Living Dead, and Return of the Living Dead Part 2, which is...
Afternoon tea time with zombies.
Is that a thing? I don't know that. Okay, all right. Because it wouldn't surprise me. After all, you've got Pride and Prejudice and Zombies now. So
that's true. And I tried to get my wife to go see that one. That was the first one that I was excited about, but my wife was repelled by the idea of ruining one of her favorite stories.
Desire. I have not seen that movie. I heard the book was decent. But
yeah, that's right. Because there's like this whole range lately of like
just add zombies.
Just add zombies to
which I'm a fan of. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I think.
And now I'm not a huge zombie geek. I've seen some of the classics, but to me, you've seen kind of one zombie thing. You've
not
seen them all.
True.
It's like
not
I watched the first season of Walking Dead, and that's all I really wanted to see. I started season 2, but I didn't even get through that one. I don't think so. It's just not my cup of zombies.
Is that to say that you just didn't like that show, or
no? It's just I get bored with it.
And is it the zombies that you're not digging, or is it the show?
No. I mean, it's the zombies. It's. I just have a thing against zombies. I don't like mindless critters.
Sad by saying that.
No.
All right. So a couple.
Even though I made my zombie overlords.
So a couple of things, guys. If you're gonna start jumping into zombies, there are a few things that you should respectfully give a chance. Even some of the best old school zombie movies at this point, it's like music. It's like anything else. Something's classic. It's amazing, but it set a new bar. It created a new thing. But we've elaborated. We've evolved. We've added to. And while you'll never get music. Like no one's going to retread stuff like the Beatles, but we have much more complicated rock and roll now. Same thing with zombie stuff. Like Night of the Living Dead is an absolute landmark movie, and it should be watched by everyone breathing. But there are much better zombie movies now because they started it, and we have evolved it, and we've created it better. So,
sure,
like any
most
other
things.
medium.
Yep.
So, a couple of the things that you should definitely check out. Obviously, all the Romero, and I'm going to say all of the Romero out of love for Romero, but to be perfectly honest, his last 3 Dead movies were not that great. Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. The remake of Dawn of the Dead came out in the early 2000s, was fantastic.
That was pretty good. I enjoyed that.
Really good movie. I still rewatch that every now and then, just throw it in because it's a fun movie. It's a really fun movie to watch. You and I have the love for Evil Dead, which not as much a zombie movie, but we can kind of slide it in there because there is undead. There's a lot of undead,
and there's zombie kind of.
So Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness. I'm quickly looking at. Dead Alive. Dead Alive, also called Brain Dead, depending on where you live in the world. That is actually a.
I thought you meant the Dead and Alive, the old volleyball game.
That's not Dead Alive. Okay. Dead Alive is not a volleyball game. They released a volleyball game. It's a fighting game. And they later released a goofy volleyball game with the characters from the fighting game.
All I remember is the volleyball.
No, the fighting game's actually really good. So Dead Alive, also called Brain Dead, depending on where in the world you live, was actually one of Peter Jackson's, if not his very first movie. I'm not sure if it was his very first movie, but it's one of his early movies. And you definitely want to see the uncut version. There is a cut version, there's an uncut version. You want to watch the uncut version. If only for one sequence where our hero plows through a cavalcade of zombies with a lawnmower. He's holding a lawnmower up and walking through a pack of zombies. It is fantastic. It is so over the top and ridiculously gory, and it is absolutely, you gotta watch it if you're a horror, gore, zombie. If you ask me, that's one of the first real zombie comedies was that one. And of course, if we step into zombie comedies, we have to mention...
Well, I don't know if I'd say that was the first one.
What would you say is the first one?
Shaun
Dead Alive, it came out 15, 20 years before. Yeah, Dead Alive came out when I was... it was probably 92...
I didn't realize Peter Jackson was around that long.
I watched that movie in high school. Yeah. That's a much older movie. So Shaun of the Dead came way later. And don't get me wrong, Evolution, Shaun of the Dead is a fantastic movie, as is Zombieland if you're talking zombie comedies. So if you just want to go get yourself some zombie comedy, get those too. For lighter fare, you could go get Warm Bodies, which we talked a little bit about before we turned the microphones on. Then there's a book for Warm Bodies. And Warm Bodies, like a TV show called iZombie, I have a fundamental problem with. The thing with zombies, the thing that Romero really captured, and what makes zombies scary, is the personification of death and the inevitability of the impossible to avoid. You can't avoid death. It is slowly creeping up on you, and that's what makes zombies scary. So when you take a zombie and you make them think, death is not a thinking thing. Death is just a force, and it is coming for you.
Which is also, it's a fundamental change from the mythology. I don't know of any mythologies that have zombies coming back with their intelligence intact. They're either a mindless puppet or they're just sort of a roaming dead thing in a cemetery somewhere. They're not, and I could be wrong, so go troll me somewhere.
Well, if you want to get nitpicky, the word zombie comes from the Haitian, and the Haitian voodoo is where the idea of a zombie originally came from. The concept of a zombie, like a legit Haitian voodoo zombie, is where they would use a drug, like a neurotoxin, and you would force it on a person, and it would put them in a dazed zombie-like state where they were very suggestible. So the whole fear is that if a witch doctor zombified you, you'd basically become his slave because you basically lost your will and the mind of your own, your control of yourself, and you would just do what he would tell you to do. So that's what
and actually
comes from.
One of my most feared creatures, supernatural creatures, it was a demon called a phalanx demon, which was inspired by the neurotoxin induced zombies, which it wasn't the same as, they weren't created like that, but these were big, gigantic demons that physically were
terrifying,
very destructive. And if left on their own, they suffered from the 7 deadly sins, and randomly one of the sins would take control of them for a turn, and then randomly something around them would suffer from it, like they might eat a chair, and they could do even more disgusting things that I won't go into here, because any of the 7 deadly sins could take over any time, anything around them. But greater demons could actually possess and take control of them and use them like a marionette. And that was actually kind of inspired by the idea of how zombies. So there is some zombie inspiration, real world zombie inspiration for my world there. Besides zombie
what would they do if they landed on sloth?
They would do nothing.
Just sit there for a turn.
Yep, they would not do anything, and if they sat there,
sloth, like you're praying for sloth.
Come on, we can get 15 in a row. We've hit them with all of our damage, 15 turns in a row. If we get one more sloth in a row, I'm sure we'll kill them this time. No, they were like sort of like Panzer tanks of the demon.
Nobody
world.
likes that. So, iZombie and Warm Bodies. I did not read the book. Warm Bodies. I did watch the movie, and it was all right.
You know what I felt? What I felt with like the fiction like that, which I agree with you. I think it's cheating, but I think it was they were trying to say, vampires were becoming saturated, and it was like they were trying to do more vampire fiction, but they were trying to incorporate the upcoming zombie craze into it. Which, I mean, these things have made some good money. So who am I, to say people can't enjoy it? But I think it was more just marketing and saying, let's take this undead thing and try it with this new thing that's getting really popular, which is zombies.
So definitely check out some of these titles. But I want to spend more of our time on some of the ones I'm about to mention are larger. Some of them are much smaller. Everyone, of course, is aware of The Walking Dead, which you may not be watching. Is The Walking Dead.
What's that?
You just said that you watched season 1 and you weren't a fan. Anyway,
that's true. I actually lied in the same, but I've time traveled in this episode. You might be watching
Walking Dead, but if you get on Netflix, you can watch a show called Z Nation. The production value is definitely not as high as The Walking Dead, but it's still a decent show that throws some decent curveballs in the zombie fiction and in, like I don't want to say there's a Joss Whedon-y aspect to it in the curveballs, but there's definitely a couple curveballs that I was like, holy, I cannot believe they just did that. Like, wasn't it supposed to go this way? Like they were totally going one direction and they cut left and zigged when I thought they were going to zag.
And isn't there like a spin-off series for Walking Dead too?
Dead, which I watched a few episodes of that, and I heard in season 2 and 3 like it really gets going, but I have not. It was very slow for you when you started. Yeah, so I didn't get into that show as much. The movie World War Z is a lot of fun and totally worth watching, but the book destroys it. And the book has nothing in common with the movie other than they both share the same title. And there's zombies in both. Beyond that, they're completely different stories. And the book World War Z by Max Brooks is so good. It's such a good book. If you are a writer, if only for the eloquence with which he creates overlapping stories from different perspectives. That's what impresses me the most about that book. Not the fiction itself, but the perspective changes. Because what he does is every chapter is from the perspective of a different character, and the characters don't know each other. He's picking people from different economic backgrounds, different genders, different societal backgrounds from all over the planet. And he writes a little story. Each chapter's a little story about, like, a female American soldier in the Midwest, a Japanese monk in, at Mount Fuji, South African dignitary, like all kinds of different characters. And you really get, like, it doesn't seem like it's coming from the same narrative.
It's sort of like these different perspectives that happen, but really well written. From what I've heard, that's true.
So yeah,
but it's zombie fiction. So,
if you're gonna run to your comic books, some of you may be familiar with the character Lady Death. If you're an old school comic, yes.
Oh yes.
Lady Death was born from Evil Ernie. Evil Ernie was first, and he is a zombie character. Now, he was a thinking zombie. I will, but in this comic book, I'll let that fly. And Lady...
What, you're saying Lady Death came from
Evil Ernie was printed first.
Well, I assume that, but she was part of the Sandman mythology, right?
No, different company altogether.
Oh, I'm thinking of a different Lady Death.
Yeah, the one that I'm talking about is a very salacious-looking character with...
I think I've seen pictures of her. Yeah. I'm sorry, I got confused with my deaths.
But she became more popular than him, so they spun off another title, and she has... Like, nobody knows who Evil Ernie is now, but a lot of people know who Lady Death is. So, and Evil Ernie was basically a zombie overlord. Like, you'll have, like, zombie lords, like, if you play Magic the Gathering, or certainly if you're familiar with the concept of a lich in D&D or World of Warcraft.
Necromancer.
Evil Ernie was kind of like that. Evil Ernie was actually
but with a much better name than most of them.
The character himself was a sad, messed up young man who ended up, I mean, I haven't read it in 20, 25 years, who ended up either dying or killing himself or whatever, and, like, death brought him back, and then he, like, worshipped Lady Death, and he raised an undead army, and, like, it just got way out of hand, but it's a fun comic book read. There's also a web series, and I have been trying to find it for you guys, and I will continue to, and if I do, I'll put it up on the Facebook page.
Sort of
a web comic, and it was really kind of sad. It was very original, and the art was great, and I read this about 5 years ago, and I'd swear, actually, it might have been more. It might have been more longer than that. It might be more like 8 or 9 years ago. I'd swear the name of it was State of Decay. Now, since then, there's a video game called State of Decay, which is also very good. It's basically Grand Theft Auto in a zombie apocalypse. There's State of Decay 2, and because of the immense popularity of these two video game titles, they have subsequently made comic books out of that video game title. So, exactly. So trying to find this other fiction that I'm referring to, which has the same title, I believe. I'm not 100% sure I'm remembering the title correctly, but I do believe I am. And it was just fantastic, although it was incomplete. The guy who was doing it got to a certain point, and because it was just a small webcomic, it's not like he had an immense fan base. So the people who found it, it was kind of a hidden gem on the internet. And he would write directly to his readership when he would post new comics. And he got to a point where it seems like he was suffering from artist depression. And he's like, I just can't do this anymore. I'm sorry, guys. I have to put this away for now. And he stopped publishing. And I don't know if he ever picked it back up again, because I lost track of it for a long time. And I have not tried to search for it again until now for the sake of doing this episode. But I really want to find it.
Hopefully it's still available. If I find it,
I would love to give the guy a shout out, because he is immensely talented, and the ideas and the concepts that he throws in this are scary and original. And it's hard to find originality in zombie fiction these days because it's been done to death. No pun intended.
When the problem is too, once you start getting into stuff produced, like major stuff, major stuff is always going to follow the formulas. And so when you get true indie stuff, it can take risks that the other stuff won't naturally want to take.
You could go out and you could also grab yourself Dead Island. Dead Island, actually, the guy who quite cleverly directed the trailer, the cinematic trailer for the first video game, a studio came after him to have him direct a movie based solely on the trailer for the game. Because it was that good and that cinematic and that engrossing and emotional. The game itself, I didn't think it was all that great. I would highly recommend going and getting a game called Dying Light instead of Dead Island. Dying Light, I thought, was a lot more engrossing and, I mean, it's scary, like very, very scary. Resident Evil, I'm a huge fan of. Obviously, a massive piece of fiction. You'd be hard pressed to. I doubt any of our listeners have not heard of the Resident Evil series, whether we're talking about the movies or the games. I'm a bigger fan of the games than the movies. While we're on games, get a copy of Zombicide. Now, Zombicide has also put out their newer version is called. I might have to look it up. It's a mid. The thing that's cool about it is the first Zombicide is modern. So there's Zombicide, season 1, and then there's season 2, which is Prison Outbreak, and then season 3 is Rue Morgue. There's also a ton of expansions for this. This is a board game. I realize I'm saying seasons and expansions, and it seems kind of odd to apply those terms to a board game, but it's literally a board game, and it's one of my favorite board games these days. And I have a lot of fun ones. But they have a medieval set 1 that they modified some of the rules when they released that. Basically, they took some of the rules that didn't work great, because there are some rules that I changed for my house games because I don't like the way that some of the rules are set up. They knew that those weren't favored, and when they released the newer version, which is medieval, so there's undead elves and minotaurs and dwarves, and there is ranged combat, so you've got crossbows and bow and arrows and spells, but you've also got swords and axes, and the whole game is with miniatures, so you get these great, real detailed miniatures. And modern board games like this are modular. So there is not a board. The board comes, at least in I don't have the medieval setting one, but I assume like the other 3, which I have the other 3. It comes with 9 tiles. Each tile's double-sided. That gives you 18 different pictures, and they all fit together. So you can change the size, the shape, and the layout of the board every time you play. So within the book, it tells you have different, basically like campaigns or scenarios, whatever you want to call it. So if you're going to play like with 2 people, you might play on only 4 tiles and have the board be small. If you're going to play with 6, 7 people, you might use 9 tiles and have the board be big. Being that I have all 3 seasons, I could lay out 27 tiles and make a massive field of, combat as the board game and play with a ton of people. I'm such a huge fan of that game. I think the guys that designed it,
because the way you do it, you end up making it more like an RPG, figure RPG.
That's right. Mixture. You played it with me. I forgot that you
I did play that with you. I was disappointed I did not get turned into a zombie and turn on the group and murder everyone. I do. Boy, do I miss House on Haunted Hill.
House on Haunted Hill.
Yeah, the bad guy.
I don't have that yet, and mostly because, most of the time it's only Sarah and myself. But that is a game that I really want to get to play with other people because, we're talking like you play with a few people, but in House on Haunted Hill, it's like 4 people, and then at a certain point in time, one of your party turns evil, and it becomes 3 versus 1, and that one person that turns evil gets more powerful.
Yeah. Exactly. It's really cool because the idea is you're all working together collaboratively until one of them is turned essentially against the rest of the party. So it's a fun, possibly zombie story, depending on it's random story. It's interesting the way they do it.
Obviously a big portion of this has been just listing off media, but I want to talk a little bit about like my approach to zombies in general.
Hold on. I gotta stop you first. I gotta stop. You missed the best series of zombie movies ever made. The best series of zombie movies ever made. So good. Best zombie movies ever.
And what is that? Which one are you talking about?
The Meryl Streep movies. All of her movies.
Come on. Meryl Streep is not a zombie. That's not nice. I like Meryl Streep.
I know that was mean. I apologize.
Meryl Streep is an American icon. She's a fantastic actress.
I was just kind of making fun of her because I find zombie movies boring. And
oh my gosh! If you find zombie movies boring, okay, it's not really fair to call it a zombie movie. It's a plague movie.
Okay, the second time I saw it, it was boring.
28 days later and 28 weeks later. Fantastic movies.
Oh, the LMAO music video? Oh, you've never... there's a musical group called LMAO who did a parody of 28 Days Later as a music video for their song Party Rock. It's very fun.
To check that out. But no, 28 Days Later kind of reinvigorated modern zombie movies because they...
That's true, because it kind of started coming back and then it started to wane.
And they were one of the first ones to make zombies like terrifyingly fast. And I'm okay with fast zombies. But I mean, rightfully so. In 28 Days Later, they're actually just humans suffering from a plague, not actual zombies. But they come out like zombie. They're zombie enough that you can chalk it into the zombie movie category.
Sort of the mindless
version of
zombies. Yep.
In my zombie fiction, the way I do it is someone turns into a zombie, they're going to be fast first. But as the body starts suffering from rigor mortis and you are not getting nutrient exchange throughout the body, the body cannot maintain the speeds with which you would normally be able to.
So you kind of have like different stages of zombies.
So when you first turn into a zombie, you are a fast zombie. But over time, you're going to slow down to be like a regular creeper zombie like we're accustomed to seeing in like Romero zombie fiction. So in my zombie fiction, there are both. You get both flavors of zombie in there. For me, I love the Romero zombie better because of, like I said, the creeping, terrifying aspect of inescapable, death in your face. It's right in front of you, and no matter what you do, eventually it's going to get you. That's what makes his so scary, is that confronting thing that you are going to die. No matter what you do, you're going to die. Even if you kill all these zombies, eventually you're going to die. And the thing with his is even the first one, it's like the initial outbreak and they slowly clean it up, but they don't get super specific. Actually, you know what? Max Brooks, this is a good point to mention another Max Brooks book called The Zombie Survival Guide. And he talks about, in that book, zombie outbreak survival, but outbreaks have different levels, and I really like this. So, like level 1 would be, 20, 30 zombies, not a big issue. Local law enforcement can take care of that. Then like level 2 would be like half a town. That's real serious. Now you're talking like you got to call in for state and backup and a bunch of posses and get it together. Once you start getting to like big city level, now you're talking about National Guard, quarantining a city, getting the army involved. It's a big deal. And then I think level 4 is full blown worldwide apocalypse. But each one of those stages he talks about in the book very seriously, and what would be the appropriate course of action based on outbreak size. And I took some of that into consideration while writing my novel, which is not complete yet. But that is definitely something that plays a very big part in how the story pans out and what I'm writing.
So in a way, his guide influenced your
absolutely.
world building.
Definitely. And his guide, like, you don't need to get it just if you're a zombie nerd like I am. There's actually a lot of there's actually a lot of useful real world information in it. A lot of the guide is not so much as zombie apocalypse survival information. It's actually if you're out in the wilderness on your own survival information. There's a lot of
it's an actual survival guide with some humor mixed in.
Well, I mean, I would say a good 50% of it is useless. A good 50% of it is so zombie related, like, talking about the different types of armor which would be useful against, zombie attack and what have you. And pound for pound, the greatest anti-zombie weapon for an untrained individual is a crowbar. Because it's easily attainable. It's easy to use. You don't need to be trained how to smash something with a crowbar. And it's a multi-purpose tool because if you need to break into a car, break into a building, you can use a crowbar to pry things open. Now, if you are on foot and trying to escape danger, you want to shed as much weight as possible. So the best crowbar you can get is a titanium crowbar. I own one in real life. It took me a year to get it. I had to wait.
This is just showing your level of obsession.
This is showing my nerd level of obsession. At one point in time, I was building a zombie go bag, and this was part of it. The titanium.
Because I actually remember you were calling around to friends asking if they knew of the local hardware stores that had 20-inch. It was 20-inch, I believe. Titanium crowbar.
8-inch. 24 is your standard crowbar size, and obviously they make breaker bars and larger crowbars that are more like 36 to 40 some odd inches long, but that's too unwieldy to carry around with you at all times. Yeah. The reason 28 inches, in my opinion, is the perfect length is because it is short enough that you can stow it in a pack and it'll stick out a little bit so you can grab it and pull it out. But it's long enough that if you are holding it from the end and you extend your arms while you are swinging to smash the skull of a zombie, it keeps their hands, at the point of impact, their hands should not be able to touch you. As soon as they grapple with you, you're pretty much dead. Like, you go from a lot safer to really, in super, super trouble once a zombie grapples with you. If it's only one, you still have a chance, but once it's grappling with you, all it wants to do is get its mouth to you, and that's very hard to avoid. If there's more than one grapples you, then another one's on you, and now you're overcome, and one of them will bite you, and that's it. Your life is over. So your better defense is just to run away, to not engage a zombie, and certainly not in hand-to-hand if you can avoid it. But if you have to, pound for pound, best anti-zombie weapon is the titanium 28-inch crowbar. And I had to order mine from overseas for like $100 after waiting a year and calling multiple companies to find such a piece of equipment. It is a very specialized piece of equipment that is used in scuba diving. Guys that do recovery, a lot of their blades and their different tools, because salt water destroys metal. Yeah, steel,
most metal,
have you, they make them out of titanium. And titanium is lighter than steel. It's stronger than steel. It's also a lot more expensive than steel. Okay. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the independent filmmakers that took Night of the Living Dead and they wiped the soundtrack. And Night of the Living Dead, actually, George Romero never got a copyright for it, which is why one of the reasons the movie was so popular back in the day, because any television station could air that movie without paying to do so. So you could catch Night of the Living Dead on old school TV all the time back in the broadcast days before cable.
Every monster making fun of show, I think, has covered it.
So these guys out of New York, I think, they got themselves a master and they wiped the soundtrack. They dubbed in their own audio and sound effects and voices. They also added their own footage and they retitled it. Night of the Day of the Dawn of the Son of the Bride of the Return of the Terror of the Attack of the Evil Hellbound Subhumanoid Mutant Dead Part 2 in shocking 2D. That
I just remember the shocking 2D part.
The title that they say on the voiceover does not match the title card that a guy is holding, and also doesn't match the title that is on the VHS sticker. So all three are different, but what I just said is approximately what it is. And if you want to look for it, just look up Night of the Day of the Dawn, and you should be able to find it. Kim's Videos out of New York City.
Google will take you.
Kim's Videos out of New York City used to carry it, and I really wanted a copy. I don't own a copy of it because back in the day it was only available on VHS, and I knew one video store near me that had it, and I had intended to pilfer it from that store and just pay the cost of it, but someone beat me to it, and then the store closed. So I never got myself a copy of it, and I didn't have the money to back in the day when I was in New York and I could grab it from Kim's Videos. So there was one other important zombie fiction that I wanted to mention, and I'm looking at my list, and I know I didn't write it down, and I'm drawing a blank now. I thought you were about to mention it a minute ago when you were talking about Meryl Streep, because I was like, it came to mind, and then we segued into something else, so I forgot what it was.
I don't know, because if there's actually a Meryl Streep zombie movie, that would be really funny.
I don't think so. Wait, was it?
Are you thinking of the Pride and Prejudice, or
No. I'm actually not thinking about that. But what was remember the Glory Hahn Bruce Willis one where that I want to say that was Meryl Streep in that one. It was either Meryl Streep or. Yeah, I think it was Meryl Streep in that one. And
there was a Bruce Willis zombie movie?
It wasn't technically a zombie movie. It was called Death Becomes Her. And he pushes his wife down a flight of stairs, and she breaks her neck, twists her head all the way around.
But she comes back.
But she doesn't die. Like, she's dead but not dead sort of thing.
Yes, and that is Meryl Streep.
You're just looking it up for me? Excellent, yeah. So there you go. There's your Meryl Streep zombie movie. It's not a bad movie either. I mean, it's definitely dated. It's very dated.
I remember that. Yeah, like I watched it once back then, I think.
It really breaks my heart that you are not a zombie fan. But is there anything that you think is important about zombie fiction, whether it be books, video games, or movies?
I think the thing that gets overplayed, but is the essential sort of theme, like story-wise, you could take and use in other ways, is the sense of impossibility, even in stories where they can come through and not everyone die. It's the sense that it is impossible. Everything is going to be taken away. It's, one little scratch or one little bite or whatever it happens to be. It's usually very simple infections or whatever. And you see it a lot in virus movies too. But it's the sense of inevitability. The zombie stories are super good at bringing forward, and it can be used in other ways. It could be your orc horde coming in and that sense of we just can't stop them.
There is
until you have your 300 moment, which is, the other important thing and the ones where you survive, there's a 300 moment, there's the, I happen to have the cure and I am legend.
I am legend. I forgot about that. Although they're not technically zombies either.
You're arguing because they're medically created? Is that why you're saying they're not zombies?
They're actually still human. They're just affected by a virus. So again, that is legitimately another virus movie, but it plays like a zombie movie. So it's
because it turns them into zombies.
For the fear and dealing with what zombie movies put out there, it is absolutely a zombie movie. But as far as being like legitimate for people who want to argue the point, like 28 Days.
Which Michael is that guy. Find Michael on social media and argue with him.
I don't want to be that guy, but I do want to acknowledge those people, because for some people that distinction is very important. It used to be real important to me. It is not anymore. For me, it's more about how the movie makes me feel and what the movie brings to the zombie genre that is more original or different or something that I didn't think of. Like, I can't tell you how many times because I've seen so many zombie movies and so many bad zombie movies. I can't tell you how many times I've been watching a movie and I do it all the time. and I'm yelling at the screen, like, nobody would do that. Like, there's common sense, and there's some stuff where they just don't. It's lazy writing. It's sloppy writing. It's like, you have to apply some common sense, especially if the characters that you're watching are intelligent. Sometimes characters are purposefully not intelligent, and that's fine. But when a character is intelligent, and you see them doing clever things and whatever, you're like, really? He didn't think to do this thing that they talked about earlier, and they showed us, and they zoomed in on, and they clearly established that this is a viable
really
option,
important.
but they don't do it. Like, why not? Because it's convenient for the story. That's why not, even though you could absolutely do that. So,
I would argue there's one of the things zombie movies are really good at as well, but it's overdone, and it has to be. But zombie fiction does it really well, but the problem is, to me, these things have to be done, and when they're done well, it makes good zombie fiction. And the other thing is the loss of someone important. Zombie movies, more so than anything else, deal with the subject of losing your wife or your child. There's just a trailer I saw. Maybe it's the State of Decay video game that you're talking about. I don't know. Some new zombie game that's coming out has a great trailer where it starts with like this young child bursting through, like biting the brain of what you think is her dad, and the entire trailer, they rewind it to the part where she's taken.
State of Decay number 2, or that might even be number 1. It could be number 1, and that might be the trailer that I was referring to. If it isn't, that's the sequel.
But that is an excellent trailer. And it really takes that moment and it does it backwards. But it did it a really good way. But zombie fiction, more so than any other kind of fiction, even like normal dramas, deals with the loss of people who are important in a powerful way. Probably because it's always a horrible way that they go.
I actually
and it's. And I was just going to say, I think when you lose someone important to you, either unexpectedly and in a horrible way, or both, it's going to have a much more of an impact. So I those are my 2 big credits for the zombie and they do them very well. The problem is that's kind of zombie fiction.
There's a sequence in my zombie tale where, people are lost, and I actually got myself crying while I was writing it. I don't know if that speaks to whether or not the sequence actually came out well, but emotionally, I really put myself there, and I got myself worked up while I was creating that moment. So I really hope that moment has an impact on a reader the way it had an impact on me as a writer.
Because there's nothing worse as a storyteller, and you only really deal with this if you like you interactively storytell like game masters do, where you spend a lot of time to build up the death of a character, and it's not impactful to the consumers. And I've actually killed party members for not
responding properly.
Not responding to the death of characters when I've, you built up a character, had them involved there at key moments, helping the party, and then, you kill them off. The party's kind of, okay, well, let's go do this time.
That was supposed to be a bigger moment. Acknowledge the big moment.
At least go, wah. At least fake it for me.
Yeah, and
so I think they learned a lesson.
The funny thing about like you mentioning that is like we have a mutual friend, Jim, who ran a campaign for me in New York, and I think we've mentioned this on the show before, where he ran me through a series that was a very intense, emotional, and I've been role playing since I was like 13 years old. So I've played D&D, Cyberpunk, Shadowrun, all of the White Wolf games, like so many different things with so many different GMs, including some really good storytellers like Jeff. You are definitely in the upper echelon of storytellers for tabletop gaming. And I got very emotional in this game, and it was the only game I've ever played, except for the ones that we've done on the show, where it was just me and the GM, and he got me to cry a couple of times during the course of that game. And it's funny because at the point of this recording, I have been with my wife for almost 9 years, and she's never seen me cry. It's not something that I do frequently.
I know. I talked to Jim after he made you cry, and I had to pay up because I was like, "Nah, Mike's too much of a man to cry." It's really. Damn it!
I appreciate
your
faith
Jim.
in me, but I am not too much of a man to cry. I think it's a healthy thing to do. It's just not something that I do.
Yeah, no, I'm joking. Yeah.
And honestly, I cry more at fiction than I do at real loss. Like, I have a healthy relationship, what I think is a healthy relationship with death. You get to live, you have to die. Like, it's a package deal. You don't get to have one without the other. Mm-hmm. So the fact that people are, the people that you love are going to die. The people, everyone around you and you are going to die. And that's okay because you get to live too. So I just think it's an important thing to embrace life as well as accept death. So when I lose someone in my life, it's just like, okay, it's sad, but generally I don't cry because of it. And but at the same time, I will almost always cry watching Rocky 2. There are just certain movies that I'll watch and I'll be like, I'll get a little choked up over it. It gets me emotional. And so it's a fictional thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm wired wrong. Like I get more worked up over an untrue story and a fictional character, or like these moments where the music and the build, and then someone dies, and you're no.
And I don't know if it's a storyteller, but I find that almost all those moments very obvious, and you usually see them coming. Sometimes from like 5 minutes within a story, you're like, that person's dead, and just because of the way they build the emotion and the type of stories you're in, and sometimes you're wrong, but I'm usually not wrong with these kind of things. But yeah, I'll tell you what.
Last NaNoWriMo.
I'm a sat for
last NaNoWriMo. I got a lot of work done on the novel, and I watched Saving Private Ryan like every other day. Because that movie is so emotionally heavy. There's so much loss in that movie, and it's delivered.
Was especially the whole first part of that movie is just
honestly, that's not what gets me. What gets me is when they're first running into other soldiers and the loss that they have occurred, and they're trying to find Ryan, and then of course when they finally get to Ryan, and the very end of the movie, of course, like all of that, it's just such a gut punch. It's such a gut punch. Yep, but it helped me. But it helped me write. So I'm a big fan of Save It Private Ryan for pulling.
That's why I like movie and music to engender the proper emotion. Even if it's just a scene you watch or a certain songs you like to listen to, use the stuff to create the emotion in you. So do you have a world builder task?
World builder task. Let's see. World building specific. I would say, if your world doesn't include zombies, and it doesn't have to, just for poops and ha-has, take a small area of your world. Maybe you got a favorite city or the capital city or wherever a chunk of the tail goes, and ask yourself what would happen if half that population turned into undead. Even if you don't want to create a writing exercise out of it.
Wargame a zombie apocalypse.
Or just a mini outbreak. It doesn't have to be a full-blown apocalypse.
Now it's an apocalypse where it's happening.
It's definitely, yeah.
It might not be a worldwide
where it's happening. Absolutely. The real world task would basically be re-listen to this episode and pick out some of the great fictions that I've mentioned and give them a try, because I'm a firm believer of that every piece of fiction has something worth sharing with you. Good
or bad,
even if it's the worst piece of fiction. Like for me, movies were, and they still are, probably my favorite form of media. Even the worst movie, there's something in there for me, because I used to be a movie maker myself, filmmaker myself. The way I used to say it is, whether it's just a clever camera angle, or a good shot, or a good performance, or maybe a great line. Sometimes it might be as significant as a good character, an entire performance, a whole script, or the entire movie. But I always felt it was worth my time to find that thing. And even in the bad zombie movies, I don't.
I have to ask this parting. What was that moment in Glen or Glenda?
Glenn or Glenda. Did I watch that one?
Oh, maybe you didn't see it.
Which,
that would make sense. Okay.
Which it sounds super familiar.
It is Ed Wood's lesser known but much worse movie.
I don't think I've ever actually sat through Glenn or Glenda, but I guarantee you there's something there, if only for the fact that it's Ed Wood, because his stuff was so outlandishly terrible. You kind of have like a Tommy Wiseau thing. He was Tommy Wiseau before anyone knew who Tommy Wiseau was.
That's what I thought when I watched.
Well, Plan 9 from Outer Space is worth it, if only for the one line of the future. Like, that line is brilliant.
It is, but I could not finish Glenn or Glenda. And I might have even been watching it with Jim, which would have made it even worse because Jim was obsessed.
He's a big Ed Wood fan.
So, and I forget, or maybe he just bullied me into it.
It's possible.
But
I wouldn't put it past him to fool you into watching it and make you watch it thinking it was good.
No, he would never like me.
Yeah. For the sake of funny torture, he absolutely would.
Yeah. Good guy.
We love Jim.
All right, so you have any final notes?
Just basically, if you've never gotten into zombie fiction, I honestly would recommend the original Dawn of the Dead, if only because I really think Romero mastered it with the original Dawn of the Dead. It's a great movie. It ends on the perfect zombie apocalypse note. The remake is really great and really fun, but for totally different reasons. The original Dawn of the Dead by George Romero is an absolutely fantastic piece of cinema, and if you're going to watch only one zombie movie, I recommend that one.
Go with the classic. All right. See you next week, folks. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.